This program is brought to you by the partners of A Rood Awakening International. Help others find truth. Support A Rood Awakening International today.
The Almighty is the master of drama, dropping lessons for our lives within the accounts of famous people throughout the Bible. But there's more. Vander Els helps us slow down and recognize the subtle wordplay that exposes the character flaws of biblical heroes. Because it's the end of the sixth day, the sun is set, and this is Shabbat Night Live. Shabbat Shalom, Torah fans. It's Shabbat Night Live with Michael Rood. We should endeavor to be just like the characters in the Bible because they were perfect, right? Well, as Vander Els puts it, there are traps in the Bible that show us the character flaws of the biblical heroes we love, but also life lessons from their mistakes to help us avoid doing the same thing. That is coming up in just a few minutes. First, let's go to the astronomically and agriculturally corrected biblical Hebrew calendar, where we see that today is the second Shabbat of the second month. And we have just entered into the 21st day of the counting of the Omer. Now, please welcome my co-host, Angie Clark. Welcome, Angie.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. You know, it's been too long since we've had a series from Vander Els.
Right. I agree.
Yes, and we are finally doing with traps in the Bible. He always picks up on the most interesting stuff. You know, we have lots of guests here on Shabbat Night Live, but he is the only one that really focuses on this. I've never really heard anything like this. And, you know, I turn to you and tell you about it, and you're like, yeah, old hat, because I go to his congregation. I hear this, this very creative stuff every week.
Yes, and he is probably my favorite teacher. And he's been doing a series on the Sermon on the Mount, and it goes deep into areas that I never even thought about. And so it's been, what he's doing with this series is literally discipling us, teaching us how to take it into the world, you know, into our world. So it's really, really good stuff.
Yeah, he's really good. First of all, he doesn't give himself enough credit. He's a very humble guy.
Yeah, he
right?
is.
And he's just a great guy. And so the congregation is called Founded in Truth.
Correct.
And it's in, what city in North Carolina?
Rock Hill.
Rock Hill.
Yep.
And every Shabbat at?
It starts about 10:15 for breakfast. And then the fellowship the service starts at 11.
Service starts at 11.
When you hear the shofar sound.
Oh, okay.
It's time to come in.
Doing it right. Okay,
yep.
Very good. So, and that's, if someone wants to come to town, they can just, of course, drop by like any other church service.
Absolutely.
They can come into this, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So it's in Rock Hill.
Matter of fact, when Deb and Greg are in town, Michael's sister and brother-in-law, they always fellowship there. So,
yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
It's fun.
It's super cool. I like how Matthew does things. So, and as a matter of fact, does he live stream?
Yes.
Okay, so if you're looking for something on Shabbat, you could live stream this,
Absolutely.
right? Because Shabbat Night Live obviously is on Friday. Well, what are we doing Saturday? Well, that's up to y'all, whatever you want to do. So I would encourage people to actually go watch his live stream on Shabbat morning.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Oh, wow, you get that every week, do you?
I do.
This is really cool. Now, we have a teaching for the Love Gift for this month. It's from a friend of mine, John Snyder.
Yes.
And he came here on Passover to teach us about the Yeshua portions. So you like the Yeshua portions. What do you like about the Yeshua portions?
You know, I haven't got to delve into them yet, and I'm looking forward to it. But I love doing the Torah portions every week, you know, and I just want to have the backup, the teaching, the training of what he's learned. Yeah. So I'm excited about it, honestly.
We talked about it last week a little bit. He took the 70-week ministry of Yeshua that Michael Rood wrote, hoping to prove Michael wrong, and ended up proving him right. That the things Yeshua talks about week by week are actually matching up with the Torah portions of that week.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's amazing. So it just further proves things. It's really great. So anyway, there's a love gift you see on the screen there. There's the teaching that you'll get with it. Plus, what are these leather things sitting there? Well, it's a pair of leather lambskin bookmarks featuring the 2 sticks prophecy. These are made by another friend of mine, Ken Cowart, which is a really great thing. He does all kinds of leather work.
Didn't he do the shofar holders?
Yes, that's part of the $300 gift is the embroidered shofar bag. If you stand your shofar up, and I know shofars are usually measured around the curve, but if you just measure straight from the floor to the top of your shofar, if you put it on the ground, It will accommodate shofars up to 38 inches tall. So that's how big this bag is, just so you know. Great stuff. And by the way, if folks want to get custom leather work from Ken, you can. There it is on the screen right there. He gave permission to give his email address, and I said, Ken, get ready, because you may have 1,000 orders coming at you. He's okay
Very
with
likely,
that.
yeah.
He does really good work.
Yes.
He also did remember the shofar holster?
That's what I was referring to. Yeah, the little holster that we did the commercial for.
And he's also, you're right. Yeah, where you blew the shofar and said, man, right in that commercial. Anyway, so he did that, and he also did our leather micro tallits.
Yes.
So he does a lot of great stuff. He does really nice work, and he's very, very fussy about that good work. So
yes.
If you want good leather work, go to Ken. So anyway, thank you for joining us today, Angie.
Thank you, Scott.
All right, so the Bible is filled with characters who were definitely characters. Matthew Vander Els helps us slow down and recognize the subtle wordplay that exposes the character flaws of these biblical heroes. Michael Rood is next, however. Please join us for the Kaddish.
There is a rabbinic tradition, even a takanot, a law which changed biblical law, that before one eats bread, one must wash their hand with a two-handled pot, a negelvesser, and say this prayer. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us by your commandments, commanding us to wash the hands. Nowhere in the scripture is this ever commanded. In fact, the rabbis will plainly say that we are the ones that made it up, and when you are obeying us, you're obeying God. Well, Yeshua said, do not follow the takanot of the Pharisees. Do not follow their man-made rules and regulations. But every time there is bread, every time we can remember what Yeshua said, what he put in place. And we can say the prayer, Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech ha'olam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, Yehovah, our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. And Yeshua said, I am the bread brought forth from the earth. This represents my body, which is broken for you. As often as you do this, if it's every meal, if it's every Sabbath, you do it in remembrance of me, because by his stripes we were healed. And Yeshua took the cup, and he said, Baruch atah Yehovah, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, borei pari hagafen. Blessed are you, Yehovah, our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. And Yeshua said, this represents the renewed covenant in my blood. The broken covenant in which we were offered to be priests and kings, Yeshua paid the price. He renewed the covenant with us and made us priests and kings. And so as often as we do this, we remember this. And we reign as priests and kings now, and will do so in the future with Yeshua for 1,000 years in our resurrected body, along with his resurrected body. And we do this in remembrance of him.
Did you know that there are traps in the Bible? I mean, I'm not talking about traps where the Israelites surprised the Philistines overnight or something, or Jacob tricked somebody into something else. Not that kind of trap. We're talking about literary traps where you're reading it and all of a sudden, wait, what? Yes, there are. And so today we're here to talk about traps in the Bible with our very good friend, Matthew Vander Els. Welcome to Shabbat Night Live.
Oh, it's great to be here. Absolutely. I love getting to hang out with you and talk about the Bible.
Yes.
That's what I love most.
And I love that you have really interesting topics. And we're going to have a whole collection of topics in this series. And the first one is, you told me there's traps in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And that was my first question is, like the Israelites trapped the Philistines? And you said, no. When you're reading it, it's not what it seems.
Yes, exactly. So and this is about my soapbox, is that the Bible is not simply this book that fell out of heaven. Adam woke up, it was the King James Version, already had his name engraved in it, right? That's not how the Bible came to be. The Bible has a very long and messy, complicated history. That's how we know there's no other way the Bible could be here today than if the Holy Spirit wasn't involved. I'm convinced of that. But yeah, so we typically open up the Bible and we start reading it, and we forget that the Bible isn't just one type of literature. It's a vast, it's a library in and of itself.
Yeah,
of
many
different
people
books.
wrote it. It's like
Tons of people, different. You had tons of different authors. You had people who collected these sayings or even orally transmitted. You have editors that brought them all together, collectors. After the Babylonian exile, you had people that kind of conflated them kind of together, if you will, and made the Old Testament, if you will, kind of standardized the Old Testament. And it wasn't random. They didn't take a whole bunch of different books of the Bible and just throw them together to make, okay, here it is. It was strategic, and they were smart. And even the stories are framed a certain way so that it's intentional, if you will. And so, yeah, traps, just like Captain Akbar in Return of the Jedi. You know, it's a trap. That's what we're kind of. He's the mascot for today's message, if you will. And when I say trap, I mean these are 3 different examples, and there's many more in the Bible where the authors intentionally lead you as the reader down a path of the story, where at the end there's a surprise reversal. It's a setup. And you come to a place where now they've pitted you against, they've pitted you against the character in the Bible, and you're critical of this character because you're reading this story and they're such a bad person. Then you get to the end of the story, and all that's there for you as the reader is a mirror to look at yourself. And then you realize you've been criticizing this person the whole time in the story, but it's actually a reflection of you as the reader for you to contemplate. Very humbling. An example of a surprise reversal, not to the reader, but this book of Esther. You have Haman doing all these bad things, and he makes the big gallows, and then at the end, he's hung on the same gallows. So that's kind of a surprise reversal, but there's many stories that do that for you as the reader. And so
it almost seems like the model for like Aesop's fables and things like that, where it's always like, it's meant to be some kind of, there's a moral to the story,
yes,
right, where you're supposed to learn from this. And
oh, absolutely. And I think that's the entire, especially the Torah, that's the entire basis of what the story of the Bible is. It's meant for you to meditate on, reflect on, and ultimately it's the story that leads us to Yeshua. But it's not just, it's meant to make a change. It's the Word of God.
And the weirdest thing is, it's not just stories. These are the happenings of people's lives,
yes,
which turn out to be lessons for us. And it's like, there's no way man can orchestrate that.
Oh, absolutely.
God made this happen and went, see, this is you.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the, my favorite books of the Bible where we can see recognizable fingerprints of the authors of the Bible. And that's the thing. Like we know the Holy Spirit was involved in all of the creation of the Bible, the coming together of the Bible. We know that God created it. God created everything. But it's really neat when you start studying how the Bible came to be to see fingerprints of the people who wrote it. In other words, you can see that there's an agenda in a good way in some of the texts. And so one of my favorite examples is, of course, the book of Psalms. Growing up, I thought that the book of Psalms was just a randomly collected compilation of songs and poetry. And when presented as that, you read through it and it's pretty interesting. But you open up and you crack open this book of Psalms. There's 150 poems and psalms and hymns there. And I never really enjoyed reading them all, I'll be honest. I mean, 1 or 2 are nice.
You don't really read Psalms from front to back.
No, it's not that. What's the point? But what if they weren't randomly just thrown in there? What if Psalm 1 is there because that's where Psalm 1's supposed to be, and Psalm 72 is exactly where it is because that's where it's supposed to be? And after the Babylonian exile, that's exactly what the compilers of the book of Psalms did. They took all of these songs, the scribes came together, and they put them in a specific order to tell a bigger story. So the book of Psalms was intentionally edited and formed with the intention of telling that story that's post-exilic for Israel. And so Psalms is divided up into 5 different sections. Oh, what other section of Scripture is also divided up into 5 different sections?
Interesting.
The Torah, right? It's meant to be a liturgical Torah, telling the same type of story. And within these books, you have groupings of different authors and their psalms. There's one, so you have David, of course, as an author of, or attributed to being the author of some of the Psalms, the sons of Asaph, so on and so forth, a couple that aren't named. And you have the Davidic collection of Psalms. And so inside of the 5 books of the Psalms, you have 5 different groupings of Psalms that were written by David. They tell the story of David. And so the first collection is Psalms 3 through 41, and it tells the story of David's enthronement and how he came to power. And then when you move on to the second collection of the Davidic Psalms, you have the Psalms of 51 through 71 and 86. And this speaks of David's loss of his throne, right? His kind of downfall, if you will, the very thing that sparked the downward spiral of Israel that led them into exile. And Psalm 71 actually says, this is the last saying of David, right? This is the last Psalm of David. And you think that would be the last Psalm of David until there's another grouping, the third grouping, and that starts in Psalm 101 through 108. And it pictures this new type of David that comes up. It's almost like this resurrected David, this David, the Davidic king that Israel was always supposed to have, but never quite got. And then finally, you have the last Davidic grouping of Psalms, which is Psalms 138 through 145. And it speaks of this new messianic society that is formed because of this new king that has come about. And in Psalm 145, it states that this new Davidic king comes, and this is the climax of all the ending point. This new Davidic king comes, he rises up with his new kingdom, and he hands the kingdom over to God. And that's the collection. Like, that's the book of Psalms is the story of the king that failed, what Israel went through in the loss, the new king that's coming. And so imagine coming out of Babylon, and you're maybe even in Babylon, and you're coming out, you go back home, if you choose to go back home to Judah, and everything's gone. I mean, can you imagine a scenario where all of your homes are razed to the ground, burned to the ground, all of your fields have been dug up or raised out, there's nothing there, and you're still under kind of occupation of the Persian Empire? It's not the most exciting circumstances. And here comes a liturgical book that's reminding you of where you came from, what got you in Babylon, but now where you're going. And that's why these 2 latter groupings of the Davidic Psalms are so important. There is a new David that's going to come. He's going to establish a kingdom, and it's going to be heaven on earth. So have hope, right? That was a very long-winded way to explain.
No, that's great. I mean, I didn't recognize that it sort of told a story and that it. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you go through it, you could realize that, but I've never made the effort to do that.
Well, you know, because they're boring. Let's be honest. If you're just reading them one at a time, okay, it's a guy that's crying out, or it's a guy that's celebrating, or it's a guy, okay, that's neat poetry.
Yeah.
But when you realize there's an intention, it gets exciting.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, this is actually, and it's not a Bible code. It's none of that. It's just the way it was designed, and so which is neat. It's all talking about Yeshua, right? Yeah. And I just think that's so cool. I don't know.
Well, I mean, and that's eye-opening because we know that if we read through the Torah, yes, that's about Yeshua. I think most people who recognize their Hebrew roots will see that, oh yeah, of course, yeah, the Torah always talks about Yeshua. But the Psalms, really? And it tells the story of how he will, who really thinks about that?
Oh yeah, so the Psalms are quoted over 100 times in the New Testament. I think that's the book that the New Testament authors prefer to quote to support their claim of who Yeshua is. And that says something, and that's why. That's kind of the summary, that's why.
Because usually you think of the Torah or Isaiah. You know what I mean? That's an easy pick one too. But yeah, I just find that interesting that the Psalms actually tells the story, and it's intentional, and that there were actually groupings, like you said, where this literally, the story takes the next step.
Yes.
That's very interesting.
So that's how cool the biblical authors are.
Yeah.
The people, and I want to say the authors, the large group of people that all came together throughout time, inspired by the Holy Spirit, to have what we have today. And I think we take that for granted sometimes. But that is just one example of the fingerprints and the framing of how the Bible was put together and how the stories were told.
The Apostle Paul was thoroughly impressed by the believers in a Macedonian city known as Berea because they were diligent in their examination of the Scriptures. But what does it mean to be like the Bereans?
If they searched the Scriptures daily, then the answer's somewhere in the Scriptures. So there has to be a directive that comes from the Scriptures. And sure enough, it's in the Torah.
In this month's Love Gift teaching, Rightly Dividing the Truth, author John Snyder presents an easy-to-follow procedure to test everything against the Torah in order to rightly divide the truth. This teaching is not for sale, and it's not available anywhere online. Instead, we'd like to give you this teaching as a thank you gift for donating to A Rood Awakening International. When you donate $50 as a love gift in May, you'll get Rightly Dividing the Truth with John Snyder on DVD, Blu-ray, or streaming on the michaelrood.tv app. Donate $100 and you'll get Rightly Dividing the Truth plus a pair of genuine lambskin leather bookmarks, handmade by North Carolina artisan Ken Cowart, featuring the 2 sticks of Israel from Ezekiel 37. Donate $300 and you'll get Rightly Dividing the Truth, the lambskin leather bookmarks, and a custom embroidered shofar bag, suitable for shofars up to 38 inches tall. Also handmade by North Carolina artisan Ken Cowart. These gifts are a limited time offer from Michael Rood to thank you for your support. Make your donation today and receive the $50 gift, the $100 gift, or the $300 gift. Thank you. When you donate to receive the love gift, you ensure that these teachings keep coming from A Rood Awakening International. Use your smartphone to scan the QR code on your screen to donate now and receive these limited time gifts. Or call 888-766-3610 or get your gift online with a donation at monthlylovegift.com.
Now we can kind of get into some traps, if you will. And like I said, there's 3 examples that I have here that we're going to cover. And the first one is, of course, the story of Jonah. And the second is going to be the parable of the tax collector and the Pharisee. And then the third one will be the reign of King Solomon, the most successful king of Israel by far. And we're going to see how the authors of Kings brings us into his trophy room to show us all the great things he did and why it's a setup. And so let's get started with the Jonah. So Jonah is an amazing story. And I'm sure we're all familiar with it, or at least we think we're familiar with it. I thought I was familiar with it growing up, and then I realized I had never actually read it. I just watched the
VeggieTales.
The VeggieTales, yeah, the VeggieTales. It's right. And so, years ago when I actually sat down and intentionally read it, that is a super small book. It's 4 chapters. And super small.
Yeah, I was amazed they made the VeggieTales movie out of that book, because when you do, because you watch the movie and then you go back and, let me read that again. And you're like, how did they squeeze a movie out of this?
Yeah, the author of Jonah was very concise on what their point was, and they ran through it. And the way that Jonah is structured and the tone that it has, it's actually written like a comic book everywhere. The scenes just change very abruptly. There's always a lot of action, a lot of exaggerated terms going on, big hyperbolic terms being thrown around, and there's dark comedy in it. If you're not reading Jonah and you're not chuckling at the irony throughout the entire thing, you're reading it wrong. That was the intention. So we know how the story starts off with Jonah. Jonah was a prophet, and he was sent to where? To Nineveh, right? And where's Nineveh? It's in Assyria. And right off the bat, you have an Israelite being sent to their enemy. Remember, the Assyrians were the kingdom that invaded the north and took all of them into exile and almost took over the south as well. So these were the enemies of Assyria. And it starts off controversial right off the bat, and we just glaze over that. But to make it worse, he's sent to Assyria, to Nineveh, to do what? He has to tell them a message of God, which is to repent. Jonah, the holy man of God, is sent on a holy mission to be a light to other nations. That was the original calling.
So this is like calling a American Christian, you're going to go and you're going to go and save the people of Gaza. You're going to tell the people of Gaza about Yeshua.
Yeah, well, there's people in Gaza that know about Yeshua.
Yeah.
But
I mean, like, you that kind of enemy territory, right? Not to say there's not everybody there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you sending a Christian to somewhere that has no concept, or is not welcome to some stranger coming in and telling them what to do. And Assyria, of all places. Yeah, it's not a good setup. But so what does Jonah do? Well, Jonah says, yes, sir, God, I'm the prophet, I'm the man, I'm going to go. And no, he runs the opposite direction. Jonah 1:3, it says that Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and he found a ship going to Tarshish. And he paid the fare and went down into it to go in with them to Tarshish away from the presence of the Lord. So Jonah's supposed to have, again, this sense of irony and very exaggerated tone to it, because that's how it was written. And here's one example. So, boy Jonah, he's asked to go to Nineveh right here, and of course he says, no, I'm not doing that. Too much, God. Not only did he say no, he went, and now look at the language. It says he went down to Joppa. Okay, that's a word that if you read Jonah, you're going to see over and over and over again, because it's one of the pattern words that the author uses here. So he went down to Jonah, and it says that like he goes down to the docks, and he goes down to the ship. So he's going down, 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 and it's a trigger word he's away from the presence of God, right? And so instead, he's going to try to go to China instead of Nineveh, opposite end of the world. And it doesn't stop there. He just keeps going down. And in the next verse, see, Jonah 1:4, it says, but the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. The ship is upset. I am going to break up. Then the mariners were afraid, and each cried out to his God, and they hurled cargo over the ship into the sea to lighten the load. But Jonah had gone down into the innermost part of the ship and laid down to fall asleep. So Jonah's going down to Joppa, he's going down to the dock, going down to the boat, going down to the lowest part of the boat, and laid down. So he is horizontal at the lowest part as far as he can get, like laying on the floor as far as he can get away from the presence of God. That's the setup for the story. And guess what? At one point, Jonah didn't have to try anymore because God gives him what he wants. It tends to be a theme throughout the Bible. You really want that okay. So he gets thrown over the boat, right? And he gets swallowed by the fish, and he's in the belly. And after he's swallowed by the fish in chapter 2 of Jonah, Jonah's sitting there, maybe comfortably in the belly of the fish. I don't know, pitch dark. Maybe he has a candle, but he's writing a poem. That's all chapter 2 is the poem that Jonah is crafting in the belly of the well. So you're supposed to get this image and just kind of smirk, like this is like a scene out of a movie or something. It's just, yeah. And it says this in Jonah 1:6, at the roots of the mountains I went down to the land, whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. So his pursuit to go down away from God took him to the furthest downward place from God, the grave. But Jonah is now seeing he has a mission to complete, so he begins to worship God in the belly of the well. And before this happens, let's see, you want to see where there's a part that you kind of chuckle at? It's supposed to be the comic book part. It's in verse 8, and it's speaking about the sailors. These sailors were not Hebrews. These were pagan sailors. And it says here, then they said to him, tell us on whose account this evil has come upon us. Like, why is the ship breaking up? Why is the wind coming? Like, who have we made mad? And they ask him, what's your occupation? Where'd you come from? What people are you? And so this is before he gets thrown off. Jonah says, hey, I'm a Hebrew and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. Then the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, what is this that you've done? For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord. He has to explain to them what a Hebrew is, but then he tries to exalt himself up by saying that he fears God. This is the man that's run away from God, but he's trying to, I'm pious and I'm a Hebrew, and it's just, as the reader, you're like, you do fear God. You fear God doing what God asks, like, so you're running away. And the whole time, Jonah is never humble enough to apologize or repent. But the pagan sailors end up offering sacrifices to Jonah's God because the wind stopped and the rain stopped. So here you have the reversal. The pagans are worshiping God, but the prophet would rather be in the belly of a well. So, yeah. And so Jonah gets spit up. We know the story, blah. He's spit up and he goes to Nineveh and he finally arrives, and Jonah gives the most powerful, articulated sermon ever given. No, Jonah gives a 5-word sermon. That's all he does. He gets to Nineveh, they're the enemies, 5 words. That's all he says. 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown, all right? In Hebrew, it's 5 words. Again, you're supposed to smirk because this long journey, he finally got there, he's the prophet. 40 days, gonna be overthrown. I mean, like, what about your God? What about, I mean, no. But then what happens? So we're seeing that as the reader, we're like, well, that wasn't much effort. And then what happens?
Hey, Torah fans, on behalf of everyone here at Rood Awakening, I just want to say thank you, because without you, nothing happens. There's no corporate safety net with a pile of money in case there's not enough. There's no government grant that keeps things going. And we don't ask companies outside this ministry to pay for commercials. In fact, some have offered and we have declined because we think this ministry should run on willing hearts, not commercial contracts. So, thank you for having a willing heart. You are the reason for every Rood Awakening. Hey, thanks for supporting Shabbat Night Live. So before the break, Jonah comes to Nineveh, gives a riveting 5-word sermon. But surely this isn't it, Matthew. What happens next?
Well, he gives this 5-word sermon, and here's the setup as the reader. Jonah does not want these people to have grace. He doesn't want them to be, they're the enemies of God, and he doesn't even want to go there. It'd be better, just wipe them off the map.
Wipe them off.
Wipe them off the map. And so, he gives this 5-word sermon, which I interpret as minimal effort, whatever, good luck. I did what I did, check. I did exactly what God told me to do. Pontius Pilate, wash your hands, walk away, right? And what happens next, like the very next scene in the comic book, is everybody repents. Everybody. Scott, even the cows are repenting and wearing sackcloth. It says even the cattle you're supposed to laugh at that. You're supposed to see this overwhelming, like not only did the king repent and put on sackcloth and fasting, the people repented. Sackcloth, it says even the cattle were made to sackcloth. And so you have
like something on a Monty Python.
Exactly. Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because that would be a great way to describe how the book of Jonah is written. Not that it is very serious, it has a very serious message behind it, but it's meant to be engaging, it's meant to be kind of funny because of all of the irony and the reversals, and it's meant to be, what is gonna happen next? Oh my goodness, really? And so how does Jonah respond? His 5-word sermon actually worked in a way that he could have never imagined. He's ticked. He's mad. That's the story. He's mad. He's so disappointed that his enemies repented and experienced God's salvation that he wants to die. Right? Again, what in the world? What is he doing? You know, you're becoming more and more critical of Jonah as you continue reading.
You were saved from the belly of a whale, and now you want to die.
Yeah, now you want to die because you didn't get your way on someone else experiencing the goodness of God. So. Yeah, anyway, 5-word sermon. And the story's about to end in that conclusion of the story of Jonah. It's about to end with a conversation with Jonah and God. And they're conversing back and forth, and Jonah is just lamenting outside the city. In Jonah 4:6, it says that God made a plant grow over him and to give him some shade. And this made Jonah happy. At least I got some shade. He was exceedingly happy about that. But then the next day, God sends a worm to attack the plant and kill it. And then the sun rises and Jonah gets hot. He starts to sweat and he just wants to die at that point. I mean, I don't know, it's funny. And God asks Jonah, and here's the trap, here's the setup. God asks Jonah, he says, you mad that the plant died? It's like, yeah, I'm mad that the plant died. It was giving me shade. And then verse 10 here, this is how the book of Jonah ends. It says, and the Lord said, you pity the plant for which you did not labor, nor did you even make it grow, which came into being in a night and perished in a night. And should not I pity Nineveh, the great city, in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know their right hand from their left, and also much cattle? That's how God asks Jonah a question, and that's how the book ends. And the thing about ending a book that way, or ending a piece of literature that way, is you're waiting for Jonah to answer the question, but Jonah's not going to answer it. So who's the only person that can answer that question? It's the reader. It's your responsibility now to answer the question. And and to put yourself in the place of Jonah. Like this whole time you've been critical of Jonah, and now you're asked the question, should God be allowed to give grace and mercy to the people that you don't want him to? And that's a question I don't like to answer. I'd rather Jonah answer it. Yeah, he's the bad guy, not me. And so that's kind of the whole setup. And what's interesting is there's a debate on when Jonah was written, right? Some date it, and historically it's dated before the Assyrian invasion. And there's many that date it as being a product of after the exile, so post-exilic story that was written down and given out. And what's interesting about both of those is either you're fixing to go into exile for an enemy that you already know about, or you've just come back from exile for the Judean community, and they're basically forced to ask that same question of, am I going to do what I was called to do as the people of God, or am I going to continue to not do my job because I don't like them, because they're my enemy? And it's a hard question to ask. It's a hard question. Because we all, just like Jonah, we all love to say that we fear the Lord and we're a Hebrew and we love all this stuff, but can we answer that question? Does God have your permission to give grace and mercy and forgiveness to the people that you don't want to have it? I don't know. I love that. And I think that's a big trap. The second trap is found in the New Testament. It's kind of a setup, and it's a setup by King Yeshua, right? And it takes place in Luke chapter 18, and it's a parable, and it says this, Luke 18:9. It says, "To some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Yeshua told this parable." He said, two men went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee, and the other was a tax collector, the worst of the worst. And the Pharisee stood by himself and prayed. And he says, "God, I thank you that I'm not like other people. I'm not like the robbers or the evildoers or even like that tax collector over there. I fast twice a week and I give a tenth of everything that I get." But the tax collector stood at a distance, for he would not even look up to heaven. And he beat his breast and he said, "God, have mercy on me, a sinner." And Yeshua says, "I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." So Yeshua, or Jesus here, he's speaking about people who find themselves frequently looking down on other people, find themselves constantly thinking that they themselves are more righteous than everyone else. And here we find this character to be the Pharisee. A Pharisee would generally be someone who was religious and possibly the leader of like a common community, right? In contrast to like a Sadducee. But the setup is the Pharisee is the religious one. The Pharisee is the pious one. He is the one who knows the Torah. And you have someone who keeps Torah, keeps the Sabbath, eats kosher, keeps the feast days, biblical feast days, and as a result of these things, they think that they're better or more righteous than everyone else. And I know that, how the setup works is Yeshua paints this Pharisee as someone that we're critical of. I mean, how could he think of himself better than someone else, And you begin judging the Pharisee for looking at the tax collector who's repenting. I mean, gosh, that Pharisee's a jerk. Like, what a self-righteous jerk, right. And we forget who the story was written to or who Yeshua said the parable was for. It was for those who judge people. And so the setup in the parable between the Pharisee and the tax collector is that in judging the Pharisee, we've now become the Pharisee in the story. And it's a multi-layered kind of impact, if you will. It's a gotcha moment. You're just as bad, even though you're judging him. And so it's one of those where you got to stop for a second and be like, man, it's not so black and white the way that we throw judgments out about other people. It's a trap, right? It's a trap.
Absolutely.
When we go to look down on the Pharisee.
I'll bet you did not know that being an Ambassador Club member gets you exclusive early access to tickets to in-person events right here at Rood Awakening headquarters. And I'll bet you didn't know that Ambassador Club members also get private invitations to surprise sales and other appreciation events, not to mention special gifts, cards, and other nice stuff. So why do ambassadors get all these perks? Because Ambassador Club members are the ones who keep the lights on, who make sure that new teachings keep coming, and they're the ones we can count on because they're committed every month. The Ambassador Club is an automated donation program of $100 a month or more if you'd like. So if you appreciate the consistency of a Rood Awakening videos, social media posts, events, and most importantly, people to pray with you on the phone and help answer your questions, be a part of the consistency that makes it happen. Join the Ambassador Club.
Let's see, I think we have one more trap here.
Okay.
Big ones and small ones. And this one is about King Solomon. King Solomon is the most praised and successful king of the Israelite monarchy, which only lasted for 3 kings. But regardless, he not only was the one that secured all of the borders to Israel, he made treaties and he made peace with the surrounding countries. It was a big deal. He built a successful army, and he's also the one that built the first temple to God. And in 1 Kings, specifically through 9 and 10, it intentionally uses a writing style to create an excitement and a type of like, wow, he did all this stuff. He takes him into King Solomon's trophy room. And unfortunately, it's describing what would be the worldly climax of the Israelite culture. This is the best that they're ever going to be before they start spiraling down. And so let's read about the great temple that King Solomon built in 1 Kings 9:15. And just listen to the language. It says that in this account of the forced labor that King Solomon drafted to build the house of the Lord and his own house and the Millo and the wall of Jerusalem and Hazar and Megiddo and Gezer. So here's the account of the people that King Solomon forced to build the great structures in his city.
And how many of us gloss over that?
Oh, yeah. It's
They forced him to build, wait a minute, forced?
Well,
Wait,
no, he's a successful king, and he's an Israelite king, and God's on his side, and yeah, so it's okay. It's okay. You're supposed to kind of, wait a second, I mean, okay, but like...
And then you dismiss it. Well, that's just the way things were back then.
Yeah, it's just the way things were. Yeah, slavery is great. No, like this is the temple to the God who freed Israel from slavery. It's the God that frees slaves. And here King Solomon has leveraged through power of the nations surrounding them, the weaker nations. He's leveraged them now to be the slaves that build the great structures in his country, just like the Israelites were used to do in Egypt. And so we start to have this overlay, if you will, of the Egypt that Israel came from, and now it's Israel, if you will. Verse 19, it continues with all of King Solomon's big things he did. It's great things. And all of the store cities that Solomon had, and the cities for his chariots and his horsemen, and whatever King Solomon desired to build in Jerusalem, in Lebanon, and in all the land of his dominion. All of the people who were left of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, who are not of the people of Israel, their descendants who were left after them in the land, whom the people of Israel were unable to devote to destruction, these Solomon drafted to be slaves, and so they are to this day. But of the people of Israel, Solomon made no slaves. They were soldiers. They were his officials, his commanders, his captains, his chariot commanders, and his horsemen. So all of the weaker nations, Solomon exploited. And instead of these being the nations that need to be wiped out or pushed out, I have a better idea. I can profit off of them. And so he leveraged them and turns them into slaves. Now notice that he has cities set up just for his chariots. Now this isn't like a Jay Leno, like that has all the cars. Oh, I got all my cars. No, chariots is synonymous with tanks.
Okay.
Tanks. He was creating a war machine.
So this was this city was a military base.
Yeah, so the outposts, Hazar, Megiddo, and Gezer are military outposts. And so he built his house, he built the temple, and then he reinforced with military outposts all around. Yeah, it's just kind of like, what's he doing? Verse 23, these were the chief officers who were over Solomon's work. 550 were in charge of the people who carried on the work. But Pharaoh's daughter went up to the city of David to her own house that Solomon had built for her. Then he built the Millo. So again, one of those things we gloss over, the daughter of Pharaoh is basically his consort, his concubine, his wife, has her own house right there. And at this point, you're supposed to kind of see that overlay between Egypt and King Solomon. It's like, oh, he's in bed with Egypt. Like, it's becoming that. The next chapter, chapter 10, reviews the splendor of the most powerful riches that came to Solomon and his achievements. And they were brought from the Queen of Sheba, right? And when she comes in and she sees everything, she lavishes the wisdom and the beauty of all the things that Solomon has. And she's marveled. And she says this in verse 8 of chapter 10, is happy are your men, happy are your servants who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom. Blessed be the Lord your God that is delighted for Israel forever, right? So you're supposed to choke right now because she's claiming, oh, you're executing justice and righteousness, but he's really building an empire with a war machine. And this is all built on the backs of weaker people. And so we continue reading through this, and we remember in Deuteronomy, it states 3 things the king should never have in Israel. It says he should never have many wives, can't imagine. Can't have too many horses because that is military power. That breeds violence, that breeds conquest, just like all the other nations. Don't do that. And much gold. Like, don't be that guy that has all the gold in the world, all the wealth in the world, because that also corrupts and breeds power through war and violence and conquering. And here we see in verse 26 of chapter 10, and Solomon gathered together chariots and horsemen. He had 1,400 chariots, 1,200 horsemen, and he stationed the chariot cities with the king of Jerusalem. And the king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stone, and he made cedar as plentiful. And Solomon imported the horses from Egypt to Kue, and the king's traders received them from Anatolia at a price. A chariot could be imported to Egypt for 600 shekels. And so through the king's traders, they were exported to all the kings of the Hittites up north and the kings of Syria. So King Solomon has now become a warlord, profiting off of violence. And then there's one verse that I think those of us who are privy to the New Testament can't really ignore. And it speaks about in verse 14, it says, now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. Besides that, which came from the explorers, from the businesses and the merchants. It's the only other place in the Bible where 666 is mentioned here, and of course in Revelation. Solomon has become the new Pharaoh in the story of the Exodus. And not only that, he's become the beast of Daniel 7, if you will. And what does the mark of the beast look like? With 666. Well, there's lots of opinions about that, but I think that 1 Kings chapter 9 and 10 will probably give you a pretty good glimpse of what the beast does and what the beast is capable of. And this trap isn't as in your face as the others. You actually don't even notice it the way the story is written. But from the point of being an Israelite and then reading this account, you're supposed to say, wait a second, this isn't good. Instead of being the holy set-apart people, Israel has now become the trophy of world domination. It says that he's the richest king in the world, he's the most powerful king in the world. They have become what they were freed from, essentially. And they have become the new Egypt. And of course, from here, Solomon dies, the whole nation splits because of his son, and Israel continues to go down, 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 just like Jonah. And so, yeah, these are the stories of the Bible that are framed out to have these lessons built into them that we sometimes miss.
I think America has missed the lesson of King Solomon.
Yeah, well.
Military power, wealth, wait a minute.
Yep. So military power, using gold to manipulate other countries for politics.
Making other people their slaves, taking over places, making military outposts all over the place.
All over the place.
Ooh, ouch.
Yeah. U.S. territories, for sure. Yeah, I think we've definitely missed that message. But if your goal is to become an empire, like the beasts in Daniel 7, then King Solomon definitely has a roadmap on how to do that successfully.
Yeah.
And so it is something that's humbling, and it's something that causes a lot of self-reflection. In our nation, we're taught the American dream, and that's what you need to go, that's your mission, that's what you go. And of course, it's most people never reach it, but that's it. You grasp for power and leverage it in this dog-eat-dog type of structure so that you can find yourself on top and successful and have everything. And that's not, it's not necessarily something that is encouraged in the biblical story.
Right. To what end? Because then there's also the story of the talents.
Yes.
Right? So if we take the parable of the talents, then you are supposed to take risk and do things and to bring it back to the master and say, see what I've done. So it's what you do with it, I guess, right? Rather than building on the backs of slaves, are you building something to maybe help others? You know, that would be the righteous way to go about it.
I think that would be a very correct way on how to balance that out. Because I don't think that we're just meant to be living in gutters and, we're the people that don't have any wealth. I think that we are here to, subdue creation. Yeah. That's the mandate. And so we are supposed to act in a way that is carrying forth the reign of the kingdom of God in ways of wisdom. But they are still opposed to the way of the world and the way the world does things.
Well, even just the way King Solomon did, like that correlation you brought of Egypt and how Egypt, gold.
Yes.
King Solomon, gold. Okay, I'm going to use slaves. I'm going to use slaves. And it was that whole, what have you missed here, Solomon?
Exactly.
That you're using slaves to build your empire. Like, this is what these people were just brought out of. Like, how ironic is that?
Passover is the story of the Israelite origin story. And then, here we go, the high point. And of course, that was the high point for the imperial power of Israel. And it just kind of spiraled out of control from there.
And no pun intended, but it is the golden rule. Treat others as you would like to be treated. And that didn't happen in that scenario.
Yeah, correct. And so I think this kind of lends to, again, Deuteronomy warned of this, and King Solomon hit every single one of them plus some. And so that's kind of a warning when you're reading this and you realize Deuteronomy says don't do this, he's doing all of them. Oh, I wonder what's going to happen next. And then it's no surprise when the split happens and everything goes downhill.
Well, awesome topic. I love this. I love talking about the traps in the Bible. Next week, we have another completely different topic.
Sure.
So we're going to invite people to come back and, providing you're coming back. Are you going to come back?
I hope so.
Okay, good.
That's the plan.
Okay, so we'll see you here. We'll see you here next week. Another great topic from Matthew Vander Els. Thank you for joining us. And until then, we wish you Shavua Tov and have a good week. Shabbat Shalom.
Whenever and wherever you are watching this broadcast, it represents hundreds of man-hours of production and post-production, and then it goes out to the world in several different languages. Why is this possible? It's because people like you support this ministry. We do our best to get this out freely to the entire world. Freely you have received. Now, this is your opportunity to do as Yeshua said, and freely give.